Good day, everyone. So for today, we will be tackling about the Asian and African literature. This is the Group 4. In this lesson, you should be able to first learn how history, traditions, and beliefs shape the literature of India, Japan, and Africa. Second, recognize the unique styles, genres, and storytelling techniques used in Asian and African literature. And lastly, explore how literature preserves traditions, reflects social issues, and helps shape national identity. Welcome to Japan. In this lesson, you should be able to be familiar with Japanese literature, recognize literature from the Archaic period, Nara period, Heian period, Kamakura Muromachi period, Edo period, Meiji period, and modern period. And also list famous works and writers from those eras that I have mentioned. Now, let's go over to this essential question that is essential for you to answer at the end of our lesson. How did Japanese history influence its literature over the years? Let's go over to the literature of Japan. Now, the literature of Japan presents a rich source of beauty and new ideas highly significant to the West. The Western discovery of Japanese literature was aided by William George Aston's A History of Japanese Literature, as seen on your screen, which is first published in New York in 1899. Now, Chinese elements are regarded as a true part of Japanese literature, just as the literature of Greece and Rome are integral part of Western literature. Now, the literary forms of China, as well as Chinese ideographic forms, are at the root of Japanese literature. Now, the Japanese have an extensive literature spanning more than 12 centuries, which are divided into the different periods. Let us go over to the periods of Japanese literature. The first period would be the Archaic period. Now, the Archaic period was marked by two events that were of prime importance to the development of literature in Japan. Firstly, we have the introduction of the art of writing or kanji from China. Now, until they became acquainted with the Chinese, the Japanese had no written characters, meaning Chinese characters were adopted to write Japanese, creating what is known to be as the Manyugana, the earliest form of kana or syllabic writing. Now, the second would be the first propagation of the Buddhist religion. Buddhism gained much greater importance in Japan. It took on the highly aristocratic and uniquely Japanese form. Now, Buddhism was actually influenced by developing Zen or Japanese culture. Literature during this period was mostly a series of songs and poems about war and historical incidents and a series of norito or prayers to the gods of the Shinto, a Japanese religion. Now, before the Japanese encountered Chinese civilization, they had no formal writing system. This is about the introduction of the art of writing or kanji from China. So, when they began interactions with China, they adopted Chinese characters or the kanji for writing. Now, this was necessary because Japanese had or lacked a written form, and Chinese characters provided a way to record their language. Now, about the first propagation of the Buddhist religion, when Buddhism entered Japan from China and Korea during the 6th century CE, it quickly gained importance. At first, it was mainly embraced by the aristocracy who saw it as a sophisticated and prestigious religion. But over time, it influenced many aspects of Japanese culture, including literature, philosophy, and art. And that explains these two events of the Archaic period. Now, let's go over to the Nara period. Now, the Nara period was actually considered as the golden age of poetry. It began in 710 AD when Nara was made the seat of the Mikado's government and ended in 794 AD when the capital was moved to Nagaoka. Now, the Nara period had two primary literature, the Kojiki, which is called the Records of Ancient Matters, and the Manyoshu, which is in English, we have Collection of 10,000 Poems. Now, the Kojiki, it contains the early tradition of the Japanese race, mythology, and legendary history. Kojiki is actually the oldest historical record in Japanese or in Japan, and it is written in a mix of Chinese and early Japanese script. Now, the Kojiki, it contains myths, legends, and early history, and it includes the creation of Japan and stories about gods or the kami, and it was written to legitimize the rule of the imperial family by tracing their ancestry to the sun goddess Amaterasu. Next, we have the Manyoshu, or the collection of 10,000 poems. Imagine we have 10,000 poems in the Manyoshu. So the Manyoshu, it is actually the oldest and most famous Japanese poetry collection containing over 4,500 poems written by emperors, nobles, and even commoners. Now, the Manyoshu captures themes of love, nature, war, and daily life using the Manyogana, which is the early writing system of the Japanese literature of the Japanese. And the Manyoshu also reflects the beauty of early Japanese poetry and culture. Now, let's go over to Shoku Nihongi, which is a history text, Izumo Fudoki, which is an ancient record of Izumo, and Nihon Shoki, which is the second oldest book of classical Japanese history. So these are actually the narrative process of Nara period. So let us read an excerpt of Nihon Shoki on its book 1. Now, the story of the Nihon Shoki tells the mythical origins and the early history of Japan, blending legend with historical records. Now, Nihon Shoki starts with the creation of the world by the gods Izanagi and Izanami, right? So, Izanagi and Izanami, they gave birth to Japan and many deities. It then introduces Amaterasu, which is the sun goddess, from whom the imperial family claims descent. Now, the book also describes the rule of Japan's early emperors, including Emperor Jimmu, said to be Japan's first emperor. Now, as it progresses, the story records wars, political events, and the arrival of Buddhism, showing how Japan developed its government and culture. Now, since it was written to strengthen the authority of the emperor, some parts are more legendary than factual. However, it remains a key source of Japan's ancient history and beliefs. Now let's go over to the Heian period. Now, the Heian period is actually considered also the classical age of Japanese literature. Now, the Heian period, it refers to the period when Kyoto or Heianjo, which means the city of peace, was the real seat of government. It is the literature or the literature reflected the pleasure-loving and effeminate but cultured and refined character of the class of Japanese who produced it. Now, the Heian period was largely a work of women. Literature during this period was gentle and domestic. Now, we have Kokinshu and the Tale of Genji for the Heian period. So these are the two primary works or literature during the Heian period. So let us tackle the Kokinshu, which is the collection of ancient and modern poems. So Kokinshu, it is an anthology of the best poems. Kokinshu's preface was written by Churayuki, and which was the start of criticism becoming a distinct form of Japanese literature. So Kokensho actually was an imperial poetry anthology that is compiled by order of Emperor Daigo. It contains over 1,100 waka poems divided into seasonal, love, and miscellaneous themes. Now, this was the first major collection to emphasize refined beauty or miyabi and emotional depth. It set the standard for later Japanese poetry and showed elegance of Heian period court culture. So that is what Kokenshu is all about. Next is we have the Tale of Genji, which is written by Murasaki Shikibu, and it is sometimes referred to as the first modern novel. So, the Tale of Genji, written by Murasaki Shikibu, it is the world's first full-length novel, and it is a masterpiece of Japanese literature. Now, it follows Hikaru Genji, which is the son of an emperor, as he navigates love, politics, and court life in the Heian period. Now, the story explores themes such as romance, beauty, impermanence, and human emotions. Now, the Tale of Genji was actually praised for its deep character development, psychological insight, and poetic style, making it one of the greatest works in literary history. This is an excerpt of The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. So, The Tale of Genji, it is actually a story of love and longing. This is where Hikaru Genji, which is called the Shining Prince, was born into nobility but denied the throne. Charismatic and handsome, Hikaru Genji, or the Shining Prince, he sought love throughout his life, from a forbidden affair with his father's consort to countless romances that left him yearning for something deeper. Now, despite his success in court, Genji, or Hikaru Genji, the Shining Prince, faced exile, heartbreak, and the loss of those he cherished. As time passed, he realized that love, beauty, and power were fleeting, like cherry blossoms in the wind. His story is a timeless reflection on the impermanence of life and the pursuit of unattainable desire. And this is why we can say that the Tale of Genji explores the themes of, again, romance, beauty, impermanence, and human emotions as seen on Hikaru Genji's experiences.
The next period we have is the Kamakura Muromachi period. This period was a time of political turmoil and warfare, which led to decline in learning. But despite this, Buddhist monks preserved education and cultural advancement emerged, such as the Renga or link verse poetry and no drama. No drama was developed by Ziyami Motokiyo, featuring a slow, stylized movements, chanting and singing, often exploring themes of spirituality and also the supernatural. This era also saw the rise of the samurai class, shaping Japan's feudal structure. Zemi Motokiyo developed the no drama to its highest form. Here are some examples of the Kamakura Muromachi period. First, we have the Shinkokinshu, or the new collection of poems past and present. Commissioned by Emperor Go-Toba, Shinkokinshu is an imperial poetry anthology that builds on Kokinshu. It contains nearly 2,000 waka poems emphasizing yugen or mystery and depth, elegance, and also refined emotions. This collection is known for its subtle theory, nostalgia, and use of nature as a metaphor for human emotions. Next, we have the Heike Monogatari, or the Tale of the Heike. A famous war epic, Heike Monogatari, tells the rise and the fall of the Taira, which was a clan during the Genpei War, against the Minamoto clan, which was also a clan during that war. This story is filled with honor, betrayal, and tragic fate, centered around Taira no Kiryomoro's ambition and his clan's eventual downfall. This epic teaches the Buddhist idea of impermanence, or that power and glory do not last forever. Next we have the Genpei Seisuki, or the rise and the fall of the Genpei War. As mentioned earlier, there were clans during the Genpei War, but this story tells the rise and the fall of that war. Similar to Heike Monogatari, the historical war chronicle details the events of the Genpei War, focusing on the battles between the Taira and the Minamoto, which was mentioned in the Heike Monogatari story. It provides a more detailed, dramatic retelling of the war, highlighting the tactics, warriors, and shifting power struggles that shaped Japan feudal era. Lastly, we have our last example, which is the Chure Zuregusa, or the Essays in Idleness. Written by Yoshido Keniko, the Zuregusa is a collection of short essays filled with observations on life, nature, and human behavior. It reflects on the beauty of simplicity, the fleeting nature of life, and the unpredictability of the world. The work embodies Zen Buddhist philosophy, encouraging mindfulness and appreciation of the present moment.
I am Happy Maypi Katagdagon, and I will be the one continuing the Japanese literature across historical periods. So first, I will talk about the Edo period, 1603 to 1868. So, the Edo period literature during this period was more voluminous, or meaning that it is long and a detailed writing. It had a far wider range of subjects. And it was produced by the merchant class and was considered godly and worldly. So the merchant class literature was like written mainly by and for the merchant class. It often included stories of common people and their daily lives, which were sometimes humorous and sometimes provocative. And the next is, during this period, forms of popular drama developed, which later evolved into kabuki, a popular Japanese theater form consisting of a colorful background, lively and emotional music, dancing, and exaggerated acting. So, the kabuki theater, this form of drama developed during this time. It is known for its elaborate costumes, exaggerated actings, and lively music. Kabuki performances were popular entertainment for both the upper and lower classes. This is according to Kinii 1999. And the Edo period was the period that saw the perfection of the haiku. The haiku, a short 17-syllable poem with 3 lines and a 5-7-5 pattern, was perfected in this period. Haiku often focus on nature and emotions. A haiku is known to depict the beauty of nature as seen in the eyes of the writer. Matsuo Basho, Kobayashi Isa, and Yosabu Son were notable haiku writers of this period. So, Matsuo Basho is one of the famous writers of haiku that capture the beauty of nature and fleeting moments of life. And Kobayashi Isa is known for his haiku that depicted the struggles of ordinary people and small creatures with warmth and humor. While Yosabu Son celebrated for his haiku with strong visual imagery and artistic elegance, according to Carter 2011. So, the next slide is about a frog poem, one well-known haiku by Matsuo Basho, translated by William George Aston. Furo ikie Kawazutobikomu Mizu no Oto, or the translation for this is an ancient pond with a sign from the water of the frog as it plunges in. So, what is the meaning of the haiku? So, this haiku captures a peaceful moment in nature, briefly interrupted by a frog's jump, only for the silence to return. It reflects the idea of impermanence and how small actions can momentarily change the environment before balance is restored. This reflects the fleeting nature of life and the idea of wabi-sabi, which embraces imperfection and the change in nature. So, some important books from this time include Koshuku Ichidai Otoko, The Life of an Amorous Man by Ihara Sakikaku, and Tokaido Chu Hisakurige, Isheng's Mare by Jipensha Iku, and Oku no Hosomishi, The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Matsuo Basho. These books focus on everyday life and travel experiences, according to Kenii, 1999. Next is that I will talk about the Meiji era, during 1868 to 1912. So, this era saw the reopening of Japan to the West and was a period of rapid industrialization. So, the Meiji Restoration brought Western influences and rapid modernization to Japan, which was reflected in its literature. During this time, literature became a tool for enlightenment and social criticism. Writers experimented with Western literary techniques while maintaining traditional Japan themes. Many works reflected the challenges of adapting to modernization and the tension between old and new values. Japanese authors also introduced psychological depth to their characters, a technique borrowed from the Western novels. So, in shorter terms, is that was when Japan changed and modernized quickly. It went from old ways with samurai to new ways with factories, trains, and schools. Japan learned from Western countries to become stronger and more advanced. So, under Meiji era is Fukuzawa Yukichi and Nakae Chomin. They wrote Enlightenment literature, while pre-modern popular books portrayed fast-changing country. So, Fukuzawa Yukichi, 1835-1901, an intellectual and educator, played a key role in introducing Western ideas and advocating for modernization. One of his most famous works, An Encouragement of Learning in 1872 to 1876, emphasized the importance of education and self-improvement, encouraging Japan to adopt Western knowledge while maintaining its national identity. So, an encouragement of learning. So, inside the encouragement of learning by Fukuzawa Yukichi, or the Japanese translation to Gakumun no Suzume, this book encourages education and self-improvement as the key to success. Fukuzawa believed that knowledge brings freedom and power, while ignorance leads to weakness. He argued that Japan should learn from the West and modernize to become a strong, independent nation. His famous quote from the book is that heaven does not create one man above or below another man, meaning everyone is equal and education is what makes the difference. So it was very popular in Japan and helped change people's mindset about learning. So next is Nakae Chomin, a partner of Fukuzawa Yukichi. So Nakae Chomin, a journalist and political thinker, wrote about democracy and freedom, influencing Japan's social and political landscape. His book, A Discourse of Three Drunkards on Government, in 1887, presents a debate between the fictional characters discussing different perspectives of governance, Western influence, and Japan's future. So, A Discourse by Three Drunkards on Government by Nakae Chomin. So, it is a political debate in a story form featuring three characters who represent different ideas. The gentleman wants peace, democracy, and freedom for Japan. And second is the champion. The champion believes in military strength and expansion, while the master just listens and drinks, acting as a neutral figure. They argue about whether Japan should focus on peace and democracy or war and power. The book is witty and thought-provoking, making politics easier to understand. Nakae used this debate style to question Japan's future direction. So, both of the books had a huge impact on Japan's modernization and political thinking. And both men played a big role in bringing Western ideas to Japan, but Fukuzawa focused on education and modernization while Nakae fought for democracy and people's right. And next is haibun. Haibun is a literary form blending prose with haiku. So what is prose? Prose is a style used that does not follow a structure or rhyming or a meter. So it is used to express personal reflections, travel experiences, and philosophical musings. It was perfected by Matsuo Basho in Okuno Hosomichi, The Narrow Road to the Deep North. So Okuno Hosomichi, The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Matsuo Basho. This is a travel diary mixed with poetry, haibun, written by Matsuo Basho in 1689. It tells a story of Basho's journey through northern Japan, describing nature, landscapes, and people he met along the way. His writing reflects Zen philosophy, the beauty of nature, and the passing of time. The title symbolizes a spiritual poetic journey, not just a physical one. And one of the famous haikus from the book is that summer grasses, all that remains of warriors' dreams. So this reflects how time erases even the greatest human achievement. So what is the difference between a haiku and a haibun, if you get confused? So a haiku is a short poem with 3 lines. Again, it's a 5-7 syllable that captures a single moment, often about a nature or emotions. That it stands alone, it doesn't need an extra explanation. And a haibun, on the other hand, is a mix of a prose. A prose, again, is a storytelling or a description, and a haiku. So the prose tells a story or shares a reflection, while a haiku adds a poetic touch to the moment. Or simply put, haiku is just a poem, while haibun is a short story with a haiku inside. So in a haibun, it's a connection of a prose and a haiku. So next is kyoka, which literally means mad poetry. It is a comic and a vulgar variety of tanka. So kyoka is a playful and often satirical variation of tanka. This consists 5 lines, the first and the third of which have 5 syllables, and the other 7 making 31 syllables in all, and giving a complete picture of an event or mood. So this poetry that humorously depicted daily life and social issues, providing a contrast to more serious classical poetry. So more about kyoka is that, again, it is a mad poem or a wild song, and it is a humorous, exaggerated, and satirical version of tanka. So an example of a kyoka, a traditional waka tanka style, 57577. The cherry blossoms fall, softly drifting in the breeze, a fleeting beauty like the love we thought would last, gone before the morning sun. But here is the kyoka version, the humorous twist. So, cherry blossoms fall, dancing through the empty streets, a perfect excuse to skip work and drink all night, blaming nature for our sins. So, a kyoka is, again, a humorous or sarcastic tanka playing with words and meaning. Next, that still falls under Meiji era, is Ichio Higuchi, a woman writer who wrote short stories on powerless women on this age, and was among the first important writers who emerged during this era. So, Ichio Higuchi, one of the first prominent female writers in Japan. Her works, such as Takekurube, Growing Up, focused on the lives and hardships of women and lower classes, highlighting the struggles of those marginalized in a rapidly changing society. So, what is Takekurube about? So, it is a novel written by Higuchi Ichio, published in 1895 to 1896 during the Meiji era. The title can be translated to Comparing Heights, or Child's Play, or Growing Up. So, it is about a story that follows a group of children growing up in the red light district of Tokyo as they transition from childhood innocence to harsh realities of adulthood. So the main themes of this is that loss of innocence. The kids slowly realize how society shapes their futures, especially based on class and gender. Next is a social divide. The story highlights the gap between rich and the poor, and the struggles of those born into difficult situations. Next is the coming of age. It shows how childhood is filled with dreams, but reality forces them to grow up too soon. So, the main characters is Midori, a cheerful girl from a brothel family, struggling with her fate, and Nobuyuki, a kind boy who wants to become a Buddhist priest but has feelings for Midori. Shotaro, a hot-tempered boy from a wealthy family, often picking fights. So, Takarubi is important. It's one of the Higuchi Ichiyo's most famous works and a key piece of Meiji-era literature. It gives a realistic and emotional look at the struggles of young people, especially girls, in changing Japan. It captures the contrast between childhood dreams and harsh adult realities. And next is Izumi Kiyoka. Izumi Kiyoka, who wrote early novels such as The Operating Room in 1895 and The Holy Man of Mount Koya in 1900, is revered for having his own distinctive style that made use of supernatural elements. So, Izumi Kiyoka, a writer celebrated for his unique blend of realism and fantasy, often incorporating supernatural elements. So, The Operating Room, or Shujitsu, in 1895, a dark and psychological short story about a doctor performing surgery. The story blurs reality and hallucinations, making the reader question about what is real. It explores themes of fear, pain, and human mind under extreme stress. So, The Operating Room by Izumi Kiyoka, or Japanese translation is Sujitsu in 1895. This talks about a dark and psychological short story about a doctor performing surgery. The story blurs reality and hallucination, making the reader question what is real. It explores themes of fear, pain, and the human mind under extreme stress. One of Kiyoka's early works showing his talents for creating eerie and suspenseful atmosphere. So the other one is The Holy Man of Mount Koya in 1900. Japanese translation is Koya Hichiri. So this talks about a mystical and supernatural tale that sets in the mountain a traveling monk that meets a mysterious woman in an isolated house deep in the forest. The woman is beautiful yet eerie, and strange events fold, making the monk question his beliefs. It mixes horror, fantasy, and Buddhist themes, showing Kiyoka's love for ghostly and dream-like storytelling. Why is Izumi Kiyoka important? So, his stories are rich in fantasy and traditional Japanese elements. He influences later Japanese writers in horror and supernatural fiction. His writing style is lyrical, poetic, and dreamlike, making his work feel like surreal fairy tales. So next is modern period. So during this time, literature is characterized by the denial of the worth of traditional writings and by themes of disaffection, loss of purpose, and coping with defeat as a result of World War II and Japan's defeat. So, modern period 1912 to the present. After World War II, Japanese literature reflected feelings of sadness, loss, and change. A well-known novel from this time is The Setting Sun by Osamu Dazai, which describes the struggles of Japan aristocracy after the war, according to Rubin 2005. So let's dig deeper about the novel written by Osamu Dazai, The Setting Sun, or the Japanese translation Shayo, in 1947. Right after World War II, it tells the story of the decline of Japanese aristocracy and the struggles of people trying to adapt to a changing society. So I will talk about the simple summary of The Setting Sun. So the summary is that the story follows Kazuko, a young woman from a once wealthy noble family as she and her mother struggle with poverty and changing social norms. After the war, her brother, Naoji, returns from the war deeply troubled and addicted to drugs. Kazuko tries to find a new purpose in life but feels lost in a world where the old ways are disappearing. So, the main themes of this is the fall of aristocracy. The novel shows how the old noble class loses its power and wealth after Japan's defeat in World War II. Struggles for identity. Kazuko tries to find meaning and independence in a society that no longer values noble traditions. Depression and self-destruction. Naoji represents the hopelessness of post-war Japan as he turns to drugs and self-destruction to escape reality. Next is the love and rebellion. Kazuko seeks love and freedom in a world where women are expected to follow old traditions, making her a symbol of new Japan. So, the setting sun is important. It captures the emotions of post-war Japan, where many felt lost and hopeless. It's one of Osamu Dazai's most famous works, reflecting his own struggles with depression and society. The title Setting Sun symbolizes the end of an era. Japan's noble class is fading and a new uncertain future is beginning. Next slide. In the 1980s, Japan established its prominence in the literary scene by producing manga or comic books, which feature retellings of ancient narrative that make use of modern experiences of the highly technological Japan. Manga became popular as a material for leisure reading for children and young adults. Part of the reason why manga was successful was its portrayal of a woman in the modern world and ultimately its representation of a traditional country such as Japan, which embraces the challenges of urbanity and the future. So under modern period, here are the important writers. So one of them is Kenzaburo Oe. So Kenzaburo Oe was a Japanese novelist and Nobel Prize winner in 1964. Known for his deep, thought-provoking works that explore themes of war, personal struggles, and the search for meaning in life. His writing is often dark, philosophical, and politically critical. So, the novel-winning literature that he wrote about is A Personal Matter in 1964. It is a story about personal struggles and responsibility. So, A Personal Matter is one of Oe's most famous novels. It is a deeply personal and semi-autobiographical story about a man struggling to accept his disabled child. So, the plot summary of A Personal Matter is the main character, named Bird, is a young man who dreams of escaping to Africa. His wife gives birth to a baby with a severe brain deformity. So Bird panics and considers running away instead of accepting responsibility. He even thinks about letting the baby die so he can pursue his selfish dreams. However, as he faces guilt, fear, responsibility, he is forced to make a life-changing decision. So the main theme of this is the fatherhood and responsibility. The novel explores how becoming a parent can change a person and force them to confront their own fears, escapism, and reality. So, Bird dreams of running away from responsibility, but reality forces him to face his choices. Next is guilt and self-discovery. The story is about a personal growth and a moral struggle, showing how difficult it can be to accept responsibilities for another life. So, why is it very important in the Japanese literature? So, it was inspired by Oe's real-life experiences. His own son, Hikari, was born with brain damage. The novel is raw, emotional look to parenthood and a personal transformation. It remains one of Japan's most powerful modern novels, exploring deep psychological and ethical dilemmas. So, next is Kobo Abe. Kobo Abe wrote fantastic novels such as Woman in the Dunes, which won the Yomiuri Prize for Literature in 1962. and was adapted into a film in 1964. So, Kobo Abe, 1924 to 1993, was a Japanese writer and a playwright known for his surreal, existential, and mysterious storytelling. His works often explore identity, isolation, and the absurdity of human existence. So, The Woman in Dunes in 1962, a short summary is that a man gets trapped in a deep sandpit with a woman who constantly shovels sand to survive. At first, he tries to escape, but over time he accepts his fate and finds meaning in his repetitive life. The novel explores existentialism, human struggle, and how people adapt to their situations. It is one of Abe's most famous works that adapted into an award-winning film in 1964. So, next is Shizuku Todo. So, Shizuku Todo wrote Ripening Summer in 1988, which explores the emotions of modern women. So, Shizuku Todo is a lesser-known Japanese writer. The Ripening Summer is a novel about youth, love, and personal growth, focusing on the emotions and transformation that come with maturity. So, Kazuko Ishiguro, The Remains of the Day. Kazuo Ishiguro is born in 1954 and also a British-Japanese writer famous for his subtle, emotional storytelling. He won the Man Booker Prize in 1989 for The Remains of the Day. So the story about The Remains of the Day in 1989 is a butler, Stevens, dedicates his life to serving a noble household, suppressing his own emotions. As he looks back on his life, he realizes he has missed out on love and personal happiness. The novel explores duty, regret, and the cost of emotional restraint. Ishiguro's writing is known for its gentle, melancholic tone and deep emotional impact. So, next is Haruki Murakami, our last writer. So, Haruki Murakami is famous for unique and imaginative stories. So, Haruki Murakami, born in 1949, is one of the Japan's most famous contemporary writers, known for his blend of magical realism, surrealism, and deep human emotions. So, what makes his writing unique? His stories often feature lonely, introspective characters on mysterious journeys. He mixes dreamlike elements with real-life struggles, making his stories feel both strange and deeply relatable. Famous novels include Norwegian Wood, Love and Nostalgia, Kafka on the Shore, Surreal Adventure, and 1Q84, An Alternate Reality. So, Japanese literature has changed a lot over time, from the Edo period's haiku and kabuki to Meiji era's modern influences, and finally to today's stories that explore deep emotions and modern life. Despite these changes, Japanese literature continues to be a powerful way to understand Japan's history, culture, and people. So the next reporter will welcome you to Indian literature.
Now that we are done with the Japanese literature, today I'm going to move forward and take you on a journey through the rich and diverse world of Indian literature. India is a land of deep-rooted traditions, spiritual philosophies, and a wealth of literary masterpieces that have captivated readers for centuries. From ancient epics to modern literature, Indian writers have shaped the way stories are told and preserved in history. Now, before we formally start our discussion, let us first ponder to this essential question. How does religion shape Indian literature? So we're going to answer this question at the end of our discussion. Indian literature does not only pertain to the literature of what we know today, or is not only limited to the literature of India, but also includes or is also mixed with the literary traditions of Pakistan and Bangladesh, as these countries were once part of a single cultural and historical entity. But on 1947, Bangladesh and Pakistan parted away from India and is now an independent or are independent countries. But despite the political divisions, their literary heritage remains interconnected. So India is home to a vast number of languages, and as of today, the Indian Constitution officially recognizes 22 languages. Among these, Sanskrit holds a special place as it was the language of ancient epics and religious texts, much like how Latin and Greek shaped Western literature. So if for the Western literature, they mostly use Latin and Greek, for the Indian literature, most of its ancient texts and religious texts or philosophical texts, since India is very focused on their philosophy, Sanskrit was the language that they mostly used. An interesting fact that I would like to add is Tamil, another Dravidian language spoken in southern India, is one of the world's oldest languages that is still actively used today. So, India, being one of the oldest countries in the world, is home to different languages that is also considered one of the oldest languages that still exists. And Tamil, aside from Sanskrit, Tamil is also part of those languages that is still actively used up until today. But when India was colonized by the British Empire, English became an important literary language, though it was mainly only accessible to the educated elite. Many Indian writers began writing in English, addressing themes like identity, oppression, and independence. This period of India gave rise to famous authors such as Narayan, Rushdie, and Lahiri. So, here are the 22 official languages of India. We have Assamese or Assamese, Bangla, Bodo, Dogri, Gujarati, Hindi, Kashmiri, Kannada, Konkani, Maithili, Malayalam, Manipuri, Marathi, Nepali, Oriya, Punjabi, Tamil, Telugu, Santali, Sindhi, Sanskrit, and lastly Urdu. So these are the 22 official languages of India. So, most literary forms and works in Indian literature incorporate philosophical and religious concepts. So, just like what I said earlier, India really prioritizes their philosophy from their philosophers and always incorporates that in their literature. The same with their religion. So, most of the Indian writers include philosophy in the theme of or as the concept of their work. So speaking of literary work, one of the oldest literary works in the world is the four Vedas of the Indian literature. So what is this four Vedas? First of all, the term Veda means knowledge. It is derived from the Sanskrit word vid, meaning to know. And actually, the Vedas is the oldest scriptures of Hinduism that were composed in Vedic Sanskrit. The Vedas are Shruti, meaning what is heard. So it is believed that have been directly revealed to ancient sages or seers during meditation. So this literary work is deemed as holy and important in the Indian literature. The four Vedas is divided into four: the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. But before that, these four Vedas is further classified into four divisions. So we have Samhitas, Brahmanas, Upanishads, and Aranyakas. So Samhitas form the core of Veda and consists of Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. It was composed between 1500 to 1200 BCE. It consists of collection of mantras, hymns, and prayers. That's why the Samhitas is mostly about benedictions, prayers, and mantras. Next, we have the Brahmanas. It is associated with Samhitas, explaining rituals and their meanings. It was composed between 900 BCE to 700 BCE and is known as the Karma Kanda part of the Vedas. Next, we have the Upanishads. It is composed between 800 BCE and the end of the Vedic period. They are derived from the Aranyakas, and it consists of philosophical works and dialogues from the Brahmanyaka and Chandogya. And lastly, we have the Aranyakas. It forms the third part of the Vedas and discusses and interprets the ceremonies from ritualistic to symbolic materialistic points of view. That's why it talks about the rituals and observances. Now let us move on to the first of the four Vedas, which is the Rig Veda. So, the Rig Veda is the oldest of the four Vedas written in ancient Sanskrit. It was composed between 1500 to 1200 BCE and consists of collections of hymns and praises to various deities and cosmic forces. It collected 1028 sacred hymns and is divided into 10 books called mandalas. Beyond its religious significance, the Rig Veda provides insight into the social and cultural and economic life of the ancient Indo-Aryan people. It has been transmitted through an oral tradition for centuries, with priests memorizing and chanting the hymns during rituals. The preservation of the Rig Veda has played a crucial role in the continuity of the Vedic tradition. Now let us move on to the second Veda, which is the Sama Veda. So the Sama Veda deals with musical chants and melodies used in Vedic rituals. It was composed between 1200 to 800 BCE. The Sama Veda, also known as the Veda of Chant, is a collection of melodies or chants which are derived from the hymns of the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda focuses more on hymns and praises in a poetic form, while the Sama Veda adapts these hymns into musical patterns suitable for chanting during rituals. The priest who recites the chants of the mantra of the Sama Veda are known as the Udgar or the Samaga, just for additional information. So, the Sama Veda is considered as the root of the Indian classical music and dance. So, the Sama Veda played a huge part of the music industry or the composed music of India today. And it consists of two main parts. The first part includes 4 melody collections called Gana, and the second part consists of the 3 verses books which are called Archika. So that is it for Sama Veda. Now let us proceed to the third Veda, which is the Yajur Veda. So the Yajur Veda means worship knowledge. It was composed between 1100 to 800 BCE. The Yajur Veda focuses on the prose mantras used in various rituals and ceremonies. So, the Yajur Veda is a handbook for priests in the performance of sacrificial rituals and is divided into 2 branches, the Shukla Yajur Veda and the Krishna Yajur Veda. So, the Shukla Yajur Veda is associated with the recitation of the mantras during rituals, while the Krishna Yajur Veda contains additional explanations and interpretations. Other term for Shukla Yajur Veda is White Yajur Veda, which means well arranged, so it means it is the main one, while the Krishna Yajur Veda's other term is Black Yajur Veda, which means the unarranged or motley collection. So now let us move on to the last Veda, which is the Atharva Veda. So the Atharva Veda is also called the Veda of magical formulas and is attributed to sage Atharvan, who composed this Veda. The Atharva Veda can be understood as the knowledge or wisdom of Atharvan or the scripture of Atharvan. It was composed between 1000 to 800 BCE. The Atharva Veda contains hymns, spells, and charms that addresses a wide range of subjects including magic, healing, and daily life. The Atharva Veda provides information related to Vedic culture, the customs and beliefs, and daily life of ancient Vedic societies such as governance and king. The hymns of the Atharva Veda are related to charms and magic spells intended to be recited by individuals seeking specific benefits or often by a sorcerer acting on their behalf. So originally, it was supposed to be only the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and the Sama Veda. But later on, the Atharva Veda was considered into the compilation and is now the very last or the most recent addition to the Vedas. Hence now why we call them the four Vedas. Moving on, India prides itself as a civilization that holds some of the world's oldest epics. So here I'm going to show you two of the most important epics of the Indian literature. And these two literatures are just closely related to each other. So for number one, we have the Mahabharata by Vyasa. So the Mahabharata is one of India's most significant and extensive epics that is traditionally attributed to the sage Vyasa, who is a central character within the narrative. The title Mahabharata translates to the great tale of the Bharatas, referring to the ancient dynasty featured in the story. So this epic is believed to have been composed between 400 BCE and 400 CE, evolving over centuries through oral traditions before being documented in written form. It encompasses approximately 100,000 slokas, or 100,000 lines, making it one of the longest literary works globally. So, aside from that, this epic is actually a group of poems in one. So, it is composed of different poems pero nakakondense lang siya into one. The Mahabharata is both a heroic epic and a profound religious and philosophical work. It narrates the Kurukshetra war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, which are the two branches of the Kuru dynasty, exploring themes of kinship, duty, righteousness, and the consequence of ambition. Embedded within the epic is the Bhagavad Gita, a sacred text where Prince Arjuna receives spiritual guidance from Lord Krishna on the battlefield, addressing moral dilemmas and path to liberation. Next, we have the Ramayana by Valmiki. So, the Ramayana takes its story from an episode in the Mahabharata and gives it a romantic treatment in the form of kavya or court poetry. It centers on the life and adventures of the couple Ramachandra and Sita. The story of the Ramayana begins with King Dasarita of Ayodhya, who has four sons, Rama, Bharata, and the twins Lakshmana and Shatrugna. Rama, the eldest, is an incarnation of the deity Vishnu and embodies virtue and righteousness. He wins the hand of Sita, the princess of Mithila, by successfully stringing and breaking a divine bow as per the challenge set by her father, King Janaka. Due to palace intrigues, particularly flee the machinations of the queen Kakeyi and her maid Mantara, Rama is exiled to the forest for 14 years. Accompanied by Sita and his loyal brother Laksamana, Rama faces numerous challenges during this period. The central conflict arises when Ravana, the demon king of Lanka, abducts Sita, leading to an epic battle. With the assistance of the Vanara, which is a monkey army, led by Hanuman and Sugriva, Rama wages war against Ravana, ultimately rescuing Sita and returning to Ayodhya to assume his rightful place as a king. So that was the synopsis for the story of Ramayana. Now, we have here a chapter from the Mahabharata titled Savitri and the Satvayan. So, the tale of Savitri and Satvayan is a legendary story of devotion, intelligence, and perseverance. So, here's how it goes. Savitri, a beautiful and wise princess, chooses Satvayan, a humble prince, as her husband, despite a prophecy predicting his early death. She remains steadfast in her decision and remains loyal to Satvayan, then decides to marry him, living in the forest with him and his blind father, King Dyumatsena. On the predicted day of Satvayan's death, since he was predicted to die, Savitri follows him into the forest. As he suddenly falls unconscious, Yama, the god of death, appears to take his soul. However, Savitri, determined to save her husband, follows Yama and engages him in a philosophical discussion on duty, virtue, and righteousness. Impressed by her wisdom and unwavering devotion, Yama grants her 3 wishes. So, namurag pagka-genie na nabuhat dito. She asks for her father-in-law's sight to be restored, his kingdom to be returned, and for her own father to have many sons. When Yama grants these 3 wishes but refuses to return to Satvayan's life, Savitri cleverly requests to bear 100 sons with Satvayan. Since Yama's promise would be meaningless without Satvayan's return, he is forced to revive him. Savitri's intelligence, persistence, and devotion ultimately triumph, bringing her husband back to life and restoring their family's happiness. This story highlights the power of loyalty, cleverness, and faith in overcoming destiny. Next, we have here more notable authors in the Indian literature. So first, we have Arundhati Roy. Roy was known for her famous novel, The God of Small Things, released in 1997. And this novel won the Man Booker Prize for Fiction in 1997. So, The God of Small Things is a story about a family drama novel written by Roy, and it is about the childhood experiences of fraternal twins whose lives are destroyed by the love loss prevalent in the 1960s in Kerala, India. So that is what the story The God of Small Things is about. Next, and the last notable author, we have Rabindranath Tagore. So, Tagore was awarded with the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. Some of his remarkable works include Manasi, released in 1890, Chitrangada, released in 1892, and the Sonar Tori, released in 1894, which is an English translation of The Golden Bow. So, Rabindranath Tagore since he is now dead, was a Bengali poet, short story writer, song, composer, playwright, essayist, and a painter who introduced new prose and verse forms in the use of colloquial language into Bengali literature, thereby freeing it from traditional models based on classical Sanskrit. So, Rabindranath Tagore explored the colloquial language and associated it in his works, making it unique from the classic literature that India have. He was highly influential in introducing Indian culture to the West and vice versa, and he is generally regarded as the outstanding creative artist of the early 20th century in India. So, since we are done with our lesson, let us go back to the essential question that we had earlier. So, how does religion shape Indian literature, we ask? And the answer to that is religion has deeply influenced Indian literature by shaping its stories, themes, and values. The works like the Vedas, Mahabharata, and Ramayana teach important lessons about duty, morality, and faith. And the Bhakti movement inspired poetry and songs that express love and devotion to God. Other religions like Buddhism, Jainism, and Islam also contributed ideas about peace, meditation, and righteous living, making Indian literature rich and diverse.
Hi everyone, I'm Canapaline B. Osik, and I am the one who will be introducing the African literature. So Africa is the second largest continent, is home to diverse ethnic groups and over 1,000 languages. Egypt is one of its earliest civilization, arose over 5,000 years ago. The continent has various religious beliefs, including polytheism and ancestral worship. Christianity reached Ethiopia in the 4th century, and Islam spread to northern Africa in the 7th century, shaping African perspective. So, therefore, Africa's rich diversity, ancient history, and religious influences have greatly shaped its culture and perspectives. Okay, we will move on to characteristic of traditional African music. First is the polyrhythmic. African music is known for its complex rhythms created through bells, clapping, drums, and foot stomping. Traditional instruments also include gongs, harp-like instruments, flutes, and xylophones. The African music comes from a combination of rhythmic patterns, traditional instruments, and cultural expressions, making it a powerful tool for storytelling, celebration, and communication. And the next is the call and response. This refers to the act of having a chorus repeat a lead singer's words in response. Okay, so we will move on to the African ritualistic dances. So pre-colonial African loved to perform ritualistic dances because they believed dance was a powerful way to connect with spirits, ancestors, and natures. It is used to celebrate important events such as births, weddings, and harvest, as well as to heal the sick and protect the community from evil spirit. Ritualistic dances also help pass down traditions, unite communities, and express emotions, making them an important part of African culture and identity. Oral literature. African literature is primarily oral, relying on storytelling and performance rather than written text. Storytellers pass down epics, poems, and narratives from memory, often blending literature with dance, music, and other performances. And griots play a vital role or a important role in preserving Western Africans' rich history and traditions through storytelling and music, ensuring that cultural knowledge is passed down from generation to generation. We will move on now to features of traditional African storytelling. It is a communal experience. In traditional African societies, storytelling is interactive, with the audience actively participating and shaping the story. This strengthens community bonds and preserves cultural heritage. Next is repetition is an important part of storytelling. In African storytelling, repetition through call and response helps the audience to easily understand and remember the stories. Next is storytelling fulfills purposes beyond being just a form of entertainment. In African storytelling helps preserve culture, teach moral values, and maintain social orders, ensuring traditions are passed down to future generations. And lastly, tone is a vital part of storytelling. In African storytelling, tone is crucial as the way words are spoken can change their meaning. How something is said is just as important as the words themselves. So, there are three key points. The first is traditional African music can be polyrhythmic or call and response. The second is African literature is commonly oral in nature. And lastly is African storytelling has four common characteristics.
Hello guys, I'm Fergus Lavador, and this is Modern African Literature. First, I must explain the past colonial experience of Africa. The modern experience of Africa comes from the traumatic colonial violence of the West and the struggles towards national identity. This is at the heart of African modernity, as modern African writing serves as a movement towards the restoration and rediscovery of African culture and thinking. Because of colonialism, African literature is heavily influenced by the West in terms of both style and language use. Writers such as Mazisui Kunene, Nongingo Wa Tongo, and late Akot Beat Petek first wrote some of their works in African languages before translated them into English. However, it is also very common for many African writers to write in languages such as Portuguese and French as well. Additionally, as for post-colonial Africa, as African countries gained independence, there came a struggle for their national identity. This is one of their main features in African writing. In the modern times, African writers drew inspiration largely from their experiences after colonization. And in their works, there are 7 major themes in African literature used after the colonization, according to Ali A. Mazurui, a writer and professor on African studies. The 7 themes were: first, the clash between Africa's past and present; second, the clash between tradition and modernity; third, the clash between indigenous and foreign; fourth, the clash between individualism and community; fifth, the clash between socialism and capitalism; sixth, the clash between development and self-reliance; seventh, the clash between Africanity and humanity. As examples of commonly well-known African literature are Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, tells the story of Akunku, a proud and respected leader in the Mufa whose life unravels when he is exiled for accidentally killing a clansman, and upon his return, he finds his village transformed and divided by the arrival of Christian missionaries and British colonization, leading to his tragic suicide. I'm not going to be explaining any of these stories as they have many parts to cover and they have a very big kanang series. So another one is Weep Not Child by Yungingiwa Dongyo, a novel set in colonial Kenya that follows a young boy named Yore, and as he pursues an education hoping it will bring a brighter future for his family, and amidst the turmoil of the Mau Mau uprising and the struggle for independence, the story poignantly explores themes of hope, loss, and social injustice and the impact of colonialism of Kenyan society. And lastly, Death and the King's Horseman, a tragic play written by Nigerian playwright and by Noble Laurette Wole Soyinka. It was published in 1979 and is based on a real historical event that took place in colonial Nigeria in 1946. The play is centered around a boy named Elisin Oba, the king's horseman, who is duty-bound to commit ritual suicide following the death of the king to accompany him to the afterlife. The colonization of Africa exposed African writers to some European languages, which then they use in their African works, such as, of course, these 3 works. Modern African literature is written using both native and African languages. Through written African literature though African literature is more dominant in modern literature, oral lore, or literature who is not lost. Up to this date, literary works of the ethnic groups Yoruba, Hausa, Zolo, and Soto in native languages still exist.
Good day to everyone. I am Jean-Claude F. Chato, and I am the reporter for the Introduction to African Prose. So, a prose is continuous yet systematic, reflecting an organized mind in stories and essays. In Africa, it often narrates social memories, rules, and history. So, a prose is like a way of writing that flows naturally and follows a clear structure. It helps organize thoughts, which is why it's used mostly in stories and essays. So, in Africa, people use prose to share important traditions, history, and social rules. Kumbaga, like, this prose is like a strategy that helps organize atong thoughts and ideas, which is used in short stories and essays. So, and African prose narratives often center on people, animals, histories, and etc. For animal narratives, the plot usually focuses on large animals tricked by smaller ones. Such narratives are called trickster stories. For this plot, mainly focuses on a large character which is being deceived by a small character. In this case, let it be a rat, and let the elephant be let the big character be an elephant. I mean, so such another plot also focuses on an attacker or that is trying to deceive its rescuer or savior, but is instead outsmarted by a third character. This third character foils the attacker into a trap. So like this plot also is one of the narratives in African prose writing. Next is we have the empires and societies that contributed to the enrichment of African prose. The first the first empire is Egypt. This country had a vibrant and strong empire that centered on polytheistic society. The Egyptians influenced African prose by writing myths that honor their gods. One of their greatest contributions of early Egyptians is hieroglyphics, an ancient system of writing. So, Egypt had is one of the most strong empire. Is one of the most. Is one of the strong empires that day. So the Egyptians were influenced by the African prose, writing myths to honor their many gods. One of their greatest contributions is the hieroglyphics, a very ancient system of writing. So I have here an example. As you can see, hieroglyphics. I can say really that their way of communication that day is very unique because I don't think it's communication or like they use symbols to like create meanings. So moving on, we have Old Ghana. It is a wealthy kingdom built on salt and gold trade, enriching African prose through its intellectual hubs, libraries, and oral traditions that preserve history and culture. So, Old Ghana, it used to be a wealthy kingdom, and is and supporting the African prose through its intellectual hubs, libraries, and oral traditions na maka-preserve sa ilahang culture and history. Next is Old Mali. It overtook Old Ghana for supremacy, emerging as a center of knowledge, culture, fostering scholarly institutions, oral traditions, and the preservation of history, morality, and wisdom through written and spoken narratives. So, Old Mali, it overtook Old Ghana for supremacy, and it also emerged as a new center of knowledge, providing a vast scholarly institutions, oral traditions, and very many preservations of history, morality, and through the written and spoken narratives in African prose. The next is Timbuktu. This city, once part of the Mali and Songhai empires, was a major trade hub with vast libraries, preserving narratives and enriching literature and civilization. Timbuktu, this was once be a city and was also once part of the Mali and the Songhai empires, and was also a major trade hub with vast libraries. So it's like preserving narratives through the literature and civilization. Next is Fasa and Aksum. These African territories, rich in oral literature, influenced northern culture through exposure to both Eastern India and Western Rome traditions. Their cultural exchanges helped shape diverse and sophisticated societies. So, if uh, Fasa and Aksum were once African territories and was very enriched in oral literature, which influenced the northern cultures through the exposures both Eastern and Western traditions, mainly India and Rome. Through their cultural exchange, tungod ana is which help nakatabang jud siya og shape sa mga societies. Next is we have oral traditions. The first oral tradition is dilemma tale. This moral tale has no clear ending, inviting the audience to judge. It sparks discussion on ethics and serve as instruction or entertainment. So, a dilemma tale, very malabo ang ending. So, it's like, and also I can say na very interactive which as a tale. It invites the audience para mag-judge or to give their insights on the tales or the stories, and also serves as an instruction or entertainment or kumbaga lingaw-lingaw lang sa ilaha. The second oral tradition is chain tale or cumulative tale. This type of story follows a structured pattern with repeating dialogue or actions and a straightforward plot. It often conveys humor through jokes and witty remarks, making it engaging and memorable. Such stories are commonly used in oral traditions to entertain and educate. So this type of cumulative tale, it follows mostly structured pattern with repeating dialogues or actions. So like balik na pud siya. Moving on, we have the common literary devices found in African prose. So the first one is parallelism. Is This is a literary and rhetorical device where similar structures, patterns, or grammatical forms are used in a sentence or passage to create balance, rhythm, and clarity. It enhances readability and impact by making ideas more organized and memorable. So I think this is very. I think no. I think this is new to some of you. So I have an example here. She came, she saw, and she conquered. This literary theory, I mean literary device is maka. It makes the sentence, I think, is what makes the thing. What makes the sentence more iconic, or it makes the sentence recognizable through its one. Kumbaga, it's if you let's say na you hear this specific sentence throughout your life, or this parallelism, it can be found in mottos, I think, like the example here: she came, she saw, and she conquered. Moving on, we have personification. This is a literary device where human qualities are given to non-human things such as animals, objects, or ideas. This makes descriptions more vivid and relatable. Kumbaga, this is a literary device where ang isa ka not inanimate na object, or pwede po siya animals or ideas, where gitagaan ni sila og human-like qualities, and this make ang ilahang descriptions is like more relatable or vivid. An example is The wind whispered through the trees. So, I don't think na ay wind na mo whisper jud. So, gigamitan diri og personifications ang wala jud wind na mo whisper, so gihimuan ni siya og the wind whispered through the trees. Gitagaan siya human like traits sa non-human things. Next is the metaphor. Is a figure of speech that directly compares two unrelated things by saying one is the other, without using like or as. It creates a stronger, more imaginative connection between ideas. So, like metaphor, kumbaga, it's not like dili. I have an example here. So, you're the sunshine that lights up my day. So, I don't think na napoy tao na literal na sunshine is ang kanina is sentences. What is implying is that ang kanina specific tao gimension there is like sila ang nagapailaw sa ilahang adlaw or tigitagaan og light through their day. Next is epithet. This is a descriptive word or phrase used to highlight a characteristic of a person, place, or thing. It often adds depth, emotion, or meaning to the subject. It's very much like an adjective. Gitagaan ni siya ang more adjective connected to a subject. So as an example here is Alexander the Great. This specific epithet, it emphasizes his power and his legacy. Next is apostrophe. This is when a speaker directly addresses an absent person, object, or idea as if it could respond. So, bali, this literary device is like nag-imply siya na ang isa ka speaker is like nangita siya sa isa ka specific na thing. It could be an object or an absent person or idea. Like it relies on them na they could respond or makatubag sa ilahang call. An example here is, "Oh, Wi-Fi, why must you be so slow when I need you the most?" This implies na ang speaker is like gitawag niya ang Wi-Fi niya, gipamantan-an niya na kanaw hinay daw kayo siya sa time na time of need kayo sa speaker. I think this is the last literary device. This is the omniscient point of view. This is a literary device where the narrator knows everything. So the narrator is omnipotent. It including the thoughts, feelings, and motivations of multiple characters. So bali ang narrator kumbaga alam tanan, so kabalo siya sa tanan ang intentions, the thoughts, the feelings, and sa tanan characters sa isa ka tale. An example here is I couldn't find any very concrete examples, so nagkuha na kong suggestions. Example here is Bridgerton sa Netflix. I haven't watched it, so like I don't know, pero I watched some clips. It's like, yeah, I think ang narrator is this specific sa Netflix is it has this literary device which is the omniscient point of view. Next are the prominent African authors. This is the last. The first prominent African author is Joseph Ephraim Casely Hayford. This is a Ghanaian, is the author of one of the first published African novels written in English. His novel is titled Ethiopia Unbound. He was also a political activist, and he wrote books that served to convey his opposition to various laws imposed by the British land management. So this specific Joseph is a Ghanaian, is one of the first published African novels written in English. So So this guy, he published his first African novel in English, and his novel was titled Ethiopia and Bound. I have here an image. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the real deal, so I just took some photos off the internet. Next is Herbert Isaac Ernest Delomo, a South African, wrote the first published English language African play titled The Girl Who Killed to Save. He was also the founder of the Bantu Dramatic Society, which is the establishment of which led to the creation of many plays. So this is a South African who first wrote an English language African play titled The Girl Who Killed to Save. So not this is very uncommon sa atua, pero sa ilahang cultures and tradition, I think it's very popular. And he was also one of the he was the founder, I mean, of the Bantu Dramatic Society, and this is the establishment na naga-host of or the creators of many plays. Next is Ngugi wa Thiong'o. This is a Kenyan writer. Wrote the first full-length East African play titled Black Hermit. A versatile writer, he wrote essays, plays, novels, and short stories, some of which were political and some were considered children's literature. So he wrote the first full-length East African play, which is titled The Black Hermit, and yang mga works, yang mga literary works is very versatile kayo siya na writer. He wrote essays, plays, novels, and short stories. You name them. And some of them are political, which were comprehensible by adults, and also some were considered children's literature for the specifically made for children only. The last is Chinua Achebe, a Nigerian, wrote the novel Things Fall Apart, which is regarded as one of the most influential African novels and has received worldwide critical acclaim. So, see, Chinua Achebe is the writer of the novel Things Fall Apart, and that specific novel is some people not I mean yeah some people claim that this is one of the most influential African novels that has received the worldwide critical acclaim. So I have here the Chinua Achebe Things Fall Apart. Unfortunately, too, I couldn't also find the real deal, so I took some examples off the internet. That was all my part, so thank you for listening. Bye.
Lesson 18.3 African Poetry by Group 4. Introduction. Exploring African literature allows us to hear the voices of African people, providing insights into their perspectives. In particular, African poetry uniquely reflects the experiences of Africans. This lesson aims to deepen our understanding of African poetry and identify its distinctive characteristics. Our objectives is to understand the origins, themes, and styles of African poetry, to recognize the significance of African poetry in preserving, identifying, and addressing social issues. Significance of the African poetry. According to Danilo Francisco M. Reyes, a poet and a teacher, once said that a poem is an answer to an unsaid question. In the context of African poetry, a poem is the response of the experiences of the African race, which includes experience of God in nature, the violence of colonialism, and the struggles of post-colonial life. Poetry serves as an emotional and intellectual expression of African heritage. There are two famous African epics in the pre-colonial era. First, the Epic of Sandiata, which is composed in medieval Mali, and the second is the Epic of Dinga, which is from the old Ghana Empire. The Epic of Sandiata, written by D.G. Bril Tamsir Nien, January 9, 1932 to March 8, 2021. A Guinean historian, playwright, and a short story writer, is a West African oral epic that celebrates Sandiata Keita, the legendary 13th century founder of the Mali Empire, originally preserved through the Grayot tradition. It was later transcribed, ensuring its legacy as a cornerstone of West African history and culture. Also, the Grayot tradition is a rich oral storytelling, music, and historical preservation practice found in West Africa. Grayots, also known as Jalis or Jalis, are historians, poets, praise singers, and musicians who pass down the history, cultural values, and genealogies of their people through generations. They serve as living archives, preserving the history of their communities through spoken word, music, and performance. The Epic of Sandiata, told by the Grayot Jeli Mamadou Kayote, recounts the rise of Sandiata Keita, the founder of the Mali Empire. It begins with Sandiata's ancestors emphasizing the power of destiny. His father, King Magan Kon Fata of Niani, is foretold to have a great ruler as a son through marriage to an ugly woman, Sogolon. Sandiata is born but faces hardships. His stepmother, Sausuma Bere, plot against him, and he is crippled until the age of 7. When he miraculously gains strength, exiled with his mother, Sandiata travels for years, learning leadership and warfare, particularly under Musa Tonkara of Mema. Meanwhile, the tyrant sorcerer king, Sausomokante, conquers Mali, essential in preserving its history. When Niani falls, Sandiata is called to reclaim his homeland. He gathers allies from his time in exile, forming a powerful army, though initially unable to harm Saumoro due to his magical protections. Sandiata crafts a mystical arrow that weakens the sorcerer king, leading to his retreat. With the help of Saumoro's betrayed nephew, Fakuli, Sandiata pursues and ultimately traps the sorcerer king. After securing victory, he consolidates his rule, defeating remaining enemies and establishing the Mali Empire. The epic concludes with the Grayot praising Sandiata's reign, declaring Mali eternal, and the role of Grayots essential in preserving in history. And on to the Epic of Dinga. The Epic of Dinga is a captivating narrative rooted in West African history and attributed to the Fulani people. This epic chronicles the legendary exploits of Dinga, the heroic figure believed to have laid the foundation for the powerful Fulani Empire. Through its intricate storytelling and rich cultural details, the tale provides insight into the societal structure, valor, and traditions of these ancient civilizations. The plot of the Epic of Dinga is a tape.
So today I will discuss the language in African poetry. Because Africa is a continent that houses more than 8,000 languages, there are 5 major language families used in African poetry. These are the followings. First is the Afro-Asiatic languages, from North America and the Horn of Africa and parts of Middle East including Semitic. Second is the click languages. Languages are primarily spoken in Southern Africa, uniquely using clicks as regular consonants. Next is the Niger-Congo language. Family is one of the world's largest, covering sub-Saharan African with around 1,500 languages and diverse subgroups. Fourth is the Sudanic language of Central Africa, classified under Nilo-Saharan, include around 60 languages with short word form, glottalized consonants, and diverse tones. Fifth is the Austronesian languages, span maritime in mainland Southeast Asia, Madagascar, the Pacific Islands, and Taiwan, grouped into Formosan and Malayo-Polynesian. This is Leopold Sedar Senghor. He was a Senegalese politician, poet, and Senegal's first president in the 1960s and 1980s. He co-founded the Negritude movement, which promoted black identity and African pride. His works reflected French colonial influence, and he published an anthology of African poetry in French. Next is Wole Soyinka, a Nigerian writer and playwright. He is one of Africa's greatest literary figures. He won the 1986 Nobel Prize in Literature for his cultural and poetic contributions. Next is Nadine Gordimer, a South African writer and activist. She won the 1991 Nobel Prize in Literature for her powerful storytelling. Her works explore apartheid, racial discrimination, and their impact in society. Last but not the least is John Pepper Clark Bikederemo, known as J.P. Clark. He was a Nigerian poet and playwright. His poetry collection, A Decade of Tongues, explores post-colonial life in Africa. And that is all for our topic. Thank you.